So the next place I want to go with this is expanding our vocabulary of formulas. Now, talking about some different types of formulas we can use. And the first one that I want to talk about is the sum if formula. And what goes inside the parentheses here is important. So the sum if formula is going to take a test range first, so like a range of cells, some condition, and then the range of cells that I want to add together. And I'll explain what this means in a minute. But what this is going to do is this is going to add up the cells that satisfy a given condition. The way we're going to read this is like this. I want to add up the certain cells, and I'm going to take the sum of these cells if the cells in the test range satisfy my condition, then add up the numbers, or I'll say the associated or related cells in the sum range. What does that mean? Let's talk about it. Let's take a look at it. So sum if these cells satisfy this condition, then add up those cells. So if I go over to my example here, I've got some songs and some artists and some genres. I'm supposed to have some songs. There they are. Some songs, some artists, and genres, and the number of streams that they have on Spotify as of May 11th when I'm recording this. And I want to find, well, this is all great, but I want to find the total streams by genre. And you know, with something this simple, it's probably easy enough to do. You know, you could say, well, there's a country song in row 3, so maybe I want to add up D3, or I'll just do it this way, D3. And there's a country song in 7, so D7. But two issues with this. One, what if I rearrange the cells? Two, what if I have 3,000 country songs? That is time consuming. That is something that I don't want to sit there doing. There's a faster way, and the faster way is to use sum if. So sum if, test range, right? Well, the condition I'm going to be looking for is to identify the genre. So sum if my condition that I'm looking for is genre, where should I tell the formula to look to find that genre? Well, that's in column C. So I'm going to say sum if this range of cells that contain my genres say exactly the word country. So because I want an exact thing, I'll actually put it over here. If you want an exact condition, especially a non-numerical condition, so something like the word country or rock or pop, use quotes. So for example, I'll put country in quotes. So country. So I'm going to say look in this range of cells for the word country, and then any cell that has the word country in it, add up their numbers that they're next to, right? These associated values, right? This country song has this many streams, and this country song has that many streams. Close parentheses, let's see what happens. I get my sum, right? So what happens is the spreadsheet goes, looks in my range and says, oh, country song. I'm going to add this number. And then it looks again and says, oh, country song. I'm going to add this number too. So I'm going to take these two values and I'm going to add them together because that's what I'm saying. Sum if my genre is country, it's the sum of those country song numbers. I can do this with rock, right? Sum if my range of genres, but this time I want it to say rock, and my number of streams. Same thing. It's going to look and say, well, here's a rock song, and here's a rock song, and here's a rock song. Let's add up their number of streams. Same idea for pop, right? I want to take sum if any entry in my genre column says pop and add up their number of streams. If I want to maybe tweak this a little bit and say I want to just write one formula instead of three, I can, because you've noticed maybe that my genres I've listed match exactly my genres here. So what is stopping me from saying sum if these genres, any cell in this genre column needs to match exactly the word that I have here in cell A12. Right? As long as anything here matches this cell, add it up. And you notice I get the same exact answer I did before. But the beauty of this is I can drag and drop. Before I drag and drop, I know that if I just drop this down, oops, if I carefully drop this down, there we go, you might notice that my range of cells has changed too. And remember, I don't want that to happen, but we've learned how to fix this, how to change this. I don't want to change the rows. So I'm going to fix the rows by adding a $sign at the 2 and the 9, because I'm fixing the rows, not the column. And same thing, I don't want my formula to keep adjusting the rows down. So I'm going to fix them with the $signs. The $sign says do not move from row 2 and do not move from row 9. So if you pay attention to my formula again, and I drag this down, you notice that the rows haven't moved. The A13, A14 I want to change, right? Because I want the thing that I'm adding by, my condition, to change based on the cell that I'm in, obviously. So this is really good. This is really great for if you're categorizing data or adding up a certain category. This is really helpful if you're trying to categorize data, right? Here I'm trying to categorize the number of streams I have by genre, and I can. The next formula actually is a whole class of formulas. So we're going to talk about counting. And counting has three forms. We have just count equals count. And equals count is going to take just a range, just some range of cells. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward command. And count, all count is going to do is going to count the number of cells with numerical entries in the given range. I personally don't see a good use for this. I think there are other better options, but maybe if you want to talk about the number of songs for whatever reason, but you don't want to count just the song column, I want to count up all of the numerical answers I have. I can even take my entire range, but it's going to return just 8. Right, count on its own, it's going to look for numerical values. I see 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whoops. So it returns 8. That's all count does. We can make this a little more interesting. Let's make this a little more interesting, a little more useful. Count if. Count if is going to work just like sum if. It's going to take a test range and a condition. There's nothing to sum, which is why you don't have like the sum part, but that's okay. Count if is going to do basically the same thing sum if did, and it's going to count the number of cells with numerical entries in a given range. Sorry, that's not right. I'm just copying the thing from above. Count the number of cells that satisfy the given condition. That makes more sense. Right? If the cells here, I'll spell it out actually, if the cells in the test range satisfy the condition, count it. Plain and simple. So if I look at my counts table here and I want to count up the number of country songs, again, easy here, right? Because they're visibly, obviously two. But what if I had 2,000 of them? Then just sitting there counting them would be tedious. So count if. Well, I want to count if the cell, or count the song, if the genre explicitly says country. There are two of them, right? 1, 2. Just as before, I can use the same trick and say, well, I want anything here to match something in this column in my little table here. So instead of specifying the word country, I will set it to refer to my country label here. Just as before with SUMIF, again, when I copy this formula down, I don't want my range to change, my rows to change. So I'm going to fix my rows with the $sign again. This way, when I copy it down, my test range doesn't change. But my condition does. And again, I want my condition to. That's a good thing. The last one is count A. Whoops. And count A is just going to take a test range. God, there we go. It's just going to take a range. This is going to count the number of non-empty cells in a range. So this is good if you're maybe counting up just like checkboxes or options. Or maybe better way of saying this is good if you're considering non-numerical data. Here's the difference. If I use count, and I say equals count, column A, I want to count the songs, right? A2 to A9, A2 to A9. Well, count is going to return nothing because count doesn't think that there are any songs there because there are no numbers. Count just cares about numbers. If I change this to count A, where now I'm considering non-numerical data, A2 to A9, now it's going to return my 8 because count A, I like to remember A for alphabet, right? You want alphabetical or alphanumeric data. Now it's going to count anything that just has a space there, anything that's got something in it, which is helpful for things like non-numerical data. Count if would be good too if I was maybe trying to count votes or something, right? I just have a list of names and I want to count up who got the most names, right? Who got the most votes. So you have the count function, you have the sum function, and the last thing I want to talk about is statistics. We've spent a lot of time talking about statistics this year, right? We talked about linear regression, we talked about modes of central tendency, all things like that. We can do a lot of this on a spreadsheet, right? We already know how to do average and how to do standard deviation. I'm going to add on to this with two more functions. One is quartile, which, as you can imagine, is going to return the specified quartile. So quartile is going to take two things: some range of cells, and then the quartile number. I'm going to be really picky about the fact that my parentheses are the same color. So the quartile numbers are going to range from 0 to 4. So 0 is the minimum, and then you have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, just like we used to. Remember that Q2 is the median, and Q4 is the maximum. So just a reminder from when we first covered it. So let's kind of look over here. I have a list of the years that I've worked at a employees have worked and their current salaries. And again, we've learned how to find the mean, right? We use the average function. We got the average numbers of years worked. And I want the standard deviation of those years worked. And I want to find the 4 quartiles in the minimum. So here is where I use my new formula, right? Equals quartile. I want a range of information. So here is my range of information. And out of that range of data, I'm looking for the minimum, which we said we use 0 for. And the minimum is 4. You can see that by looking at it. I can do this for Q1, right? I'm going to take my range of data, but I want Q1. I can do this for Q2. I'm sure there's a faster way. I just haven't found it yet. And we're just going to keep going on this, right? Quartile, range, quartile 3, quartile, the range I want, quartile 4. There it is. Why do we do this? Statistics, right? I can use this now to test for outliers. I can find my range, right? My range is just my maximum minus my minimum. And my IQR is Q3 minus Q1. And I could actually even go farther if I wanted to test for outliers. Of course, all this can carry over to my current salary as well, right? And in this case, you can kind of see that the column did shift, right? I went from column A to column B, but that's fine. I wanted it to this time, right? I wanted my reference to be relative so that when I slid it over one box, it slid over one box here too. So I get my salary data like I want. The last formula I'm going to go through is CORREL. And CORREL stands for correlation. I have to be careful with CORREL because normally you would think about X, Y, right? It is backwards. Correlation wants the Y values first and then the X values. So correlation is backwards. Right? Correlation takes Y first. So be careful with that. As you can imagine, this returns R, which is, as we know, the correlation coefficient. So if I want the correlation of between the years that you work at a company and the salary that you make, I can do that. Correlation equals CORREL. Y values first, right? If I were to think about this on an axis, I would think about the years worked along the x-axis and the salary along the y-axis. So my y values are my salary. So current salary, y values, B2 to B11. X values, years worked, A2 to A11. Here's my correlation coefficient. And if I wanted to put this into 3 decimals or 2 decimals like we're used to, I can. There it is. What does this tell you? Well, this obviously, as we've learned, tells us that there's a strong correlation between career length and salary. So that's why all of this matters. That's why all of this is important. One of the great things about a spreadsheet is it saves us a lot of time once you learn how to speak the language, like I said. Right, so all this work that we're used to doing on our calculators, you can still do on your calculators, but if you don't have your calculator on you, you can now just do it all in a spreadsheet. We've learned all of these equivalents from what I know how to do on my calculator, I now know how to do on a spreadsheet, right? We've learned how to average standard deviation, the quartiles, the correlation. I can count things up. I can add conditionally. These are all formulas. These are all things that will help you stand out kind of in the business world, in the real world, when you go to demonstrate these skills and go to actually apply these skills. Being a savvy spreadsheet user is so important right now in the 21st century.